Order for the meeting today, the August 17th. So, no one for public comment. So we'll go right into the approval items. Number one is the minutes for the July 20 meeting for the Finance Committee. Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Okay, any comment or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, show of hands, passes. Item 2 is banking signature cards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, for those who were able to attend the Facilities Committee, you had the pleasure of meeting our new Director of Finance, Mr. David M. Owens, CPA. So we are glad to bring to you this request today as a result of his coming onto staff with us, because we now need to add him to our banking signature cards and to the authorization list for investment transactions with Synovus. So
Yes.
it is indeed.
Sorry,
Mr. Owens, that's all right, Mr. Owens. Would you like to say a few words?
I'm David Owens, born and raised here in Brunswick. Went to school for my undergrad at UGA. Got my MBA at Georgia State. Worked in Atlanta for about 12, 14 years, and my career just happened to bring me back here. The last 8.5 years I've been with Georgia Pacific, doing various roles with them. Started as a senior analyst accountant, was plant controller of Sterling, and then the Brunswick Mill wanted me back, so they brought me over there as a manager of analysis. And the last couple of years I've been supporting about 3 mills in the southeast from a cost forecasting, planning, tracking, reporting, and also capital and capital projects. Now I'm happy to be here.
And we're very pleased to have him. He's already jumped in, helping Ms. Wilson with some audit preparation duties and getting his feet underneath him a little bit, just getting to know our policies and procedures, just sort of the workflow around here.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, sir, I appreciate the opportunity to give him the introduction. Thank you. So based on that, we do need to alter our signature cards with Truist and with Synovus, so that's the request that you have before you today.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to address this need on.
I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend to the full commission that we approve the chairman and vice chairman of the Joint Water Sewer continue to be authorized to execute the necessary banking resolution and signature cards with Truist Bank, and that the chairman, vice chair, executive director, deputy executive director, and director of finance be authorized signatories of the Truist Bank accounts and Synovus investment accounts of the Joint Water Sewer.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any questions or comments?
Yeah, so is it, at one time we talked about kind of having 2 people from different fields. Does that apply here at all? I'm trying to remember exactly what. Go ahead, Frank.
You have the Office of the Director and Finance, if that's your question.
Ma'am?
Office of the Director and Finance, so you have 2 different divisions within the
yeah.
organization. Yes, sir.
So this would be signature authority for checking, we have to decide 2 signatures just of checks above 5,000, which is usually not a problem because typically me and Ms. Roberts are here. But occasionally when one of us has had to be out, we've had to call in the chairman to sign checks. And so now we'll have Mr. Owens on staff to be able to do that as well.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor? Passes. Item 3 is annual flood insurance renewal. Ms. Roberts.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. You may recall back in March, we brought to you renewals for the property and liability insurance coverages. We explained at that particular time that the flood insurance would renew at the end of July. We now have that information. In the increase is about 5%, $1,600 over the 2 policies. You see their excess flood renewal. I want to explain that excess doesn't mean excessive. It just means that the National Flood Insurance Policy program covers us up to $500,000. This, we'll call it excess for the time, covers the remaining $3.5 million up to the replacement cost of just over $4 million. So just a little explanation of the language used there. But we are bringing to you the request to renew that flood coverage as stated in that table.
Given the dollar value, we did not ask Mr. McGinty to join us today.
That's
but
correct.
He will be available if we need him for tomorrow's meeting.
Thank you.
Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend the full commission approve flood insurance renewal rates as listed in the attached memo provided by staff.
I'll second it.
Questions or comments?
Have we recently kind of reunitized our stuff though, and kind of made sure that our values are?
Yes, sir, we
obviously
actually-
the market's gone crazy.
Absolutely. We actually had Mr. McGinty come and sit with staff back in May, if memory serves correctly, because we did want to renew, review rather those coverages as we were going through this renewal process.
Well, one time we kind of talked about, maybe it wasn't the exact right time, but we talked about kind of catalyst of, we've got a couple different insurance books of business, kind of looking at, combining those and seeing if there was some opportunity for savings just by.
We were looking at that, particularly with the property insurance, given that it's significantly higher dollar value than the flood insurance here. So we did not look at that for this renewal, but certainly as we come up on next year's property insurance renewal, and well before that, we'll start working with our providers on that.
I know we got workers' comp for some and
Right.
different agencies for this, and I think they all do all of it, so.
Yes, sir.
Might be
Well,
worth
and each time we go to the market, we do look for that bidder who's going to be the best coverage for the best price. So,
Broker.
I beg your
He's talking
pardon?
about maybe combining brokers.
I beg your pardon. Yes, sir,
We got a
I
broker for
misunderstood
this,
the
a broker
request.
For that, and a broker for that, and they all do what the other ones do.
You're absolutely
It might make
correct.
sense to say, hey, just be our broker. I mean, I realize the timing isn't the same on all of them, but there's no reason we can't make it the same.
Certainly. Thank you for that clarification. Yes, sir.
Yeah, two thoughts. One is to see if we have an opportunity for value by consolidating to brokers, to Commissioner Stevens' remark. The other is the value of our physical assets. We had some discussion a few months ago about that, as to if we wanted to redefine the scope, let me use those terms, as to
Okay.
what our physical assets should be for coverage, specifically related to a flood or a major disaster, because a lot of our facilities are subterranean, and they're designed to be that way.
Right.
And so it would seem not a good use of our funding to buy premiums for something that's underground and designed to be that way in every case. So
Understood.
that was a discussion we had a number of months ago, so we probably should look at that as to define what is the scope that our carriers should evaluate for us. And perhaps the premium would be improved in some way.
Sure. I will say, if you look at the flood insurance, we've got this building covered, and then the operations buildings at the 3 wastewater plants are the only things covered
Okay.
with flood insurance.
But we had general coverage.
General liability and
General
property insurance. that we
liability
need to
coverage.
All
confirm.
of it.
Right.
Yeah.
To Commissioner Duncan's point, that's exactly what we talked about last time, is some of those, might be a $5 million piece of equipment, but short of
Right.
a earthquake,
Total
what's
loss.
gonna damage it?
Right.
And to some extent, should we be, raise our deductibles, be self-assured on some of these? And I don't know, I'm just proposing we look at it, I'm not proposing we make changes, just that we,
Sure.
as staff before next year, that we don't have the same conversation we had last year, which was, should we look at combining brokers, should we?
Right.
And it might be the answer is no, but I think we should at least explore it.
Yes, sir.
To that point, there's 2 of them on here that say 1703 through 1715 Gloucester.
Yeah, that's
And
the
it's got-
500,000, which is the national flood insurance program,
Yes, sir. Excuse me.
primary, and then
That's
the
right.
excess coverage for the amount over 500,000 for the total replacement cost of the entire building. So that's why there's 2 listed.
Why are there 2 addresses, is what I was gonna ask.
The 2 addresses, one of them is the annex.
Okay, so.
On the other side of the-
But I just wanna make sure we remove from the policy CVS when we sold it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, we did.
If it's not on here, it's not.
That's correct.
Okay. I saw it 1703, I thought maybe it was CVS.
Other comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Those in favor? Passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And then item 4. Andrew?
Yes, sir. As part of our annual budgeting process, we brought this item before you for consideration, and that is to replace the 4 VACCON trucks we currently use in our fleet. What we have done is went forth and got from the Adams Equipment, who is the supplier of the VACCON trucks that we use. We got a trade-in value of $125,000 for each of those pieces of equipment. and the equipment is about $500,000 apiece. So essentially, we're trading in 4 and getting a buy 3, get 1 free deal by trading in the 4. So the total amount for the purchase would be just shy of 1.5 million. What we done previously, and then we think this practice is effective moving forward, is we actually finance that for the 5-year life of the hopeful 5-year life of the equipment. And so we used the numbers in the budgetary process from Adams at the 3.78%. We went out to a couple of other financing opportunities. Truist Financial, our banking partner, came back with the best rates, and so our recommendation is to move forward with financing the purchase of these 4 VACCON trucks at 5 years at 2.79% interest. And then the trucks are hopefully be under production very soon. So if this is approved today, we'll have new VACCONs in the very near future, which is a good thing because the longer you use the equipment, the lower your trade-in value is going to get turning it back in. So we'll say there's a typo in the motion that we need to correct before tomorrow, Ms. Janice. There's 2 4s in the motion down there for you. There should only be 1 4.
The chair will entertain a motion.
I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend that the full commission approve the financing resolution in the amount of $1,458,992 on a 5-year term with Truist Financial Corporation as listed in the attached provided by staff.
I'll second the motion, but I do have a question.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
real
please.
quick, I will say, this is budgeted in the systems pumping and maintenance operating budget at the 3.78%. So it'll actually come in a little under the budgeted amount if approved.
So this is a huge piece of capital equipment.
Yes.
I mean, for 5 years, just seems like a pretty low depreciation schedule to me. Is that like industry standard, or is it?
Well, what we have found previously when we've had equipment for longer than this, essentially was limited trade-in value potential at that point. 5 years is still the equipment's in decent enough shape that we get good trade-in value on these. And so just for your information, when we did this 5 years ago, we financed $1,497,000. So by 5 years later, we're actually financing less money by getting the higher trade-in value on the equipment.
So they're approximately $500,000 each.
Approximately $500,000 each, that's
So
correct.
Over 5 years, they're approximately $100,000 each.
125 is what we're getting as trade-in.
No, I'm saying they're approximately $100,000.
Oh, yes, sure, on the financing, that's correct.
Depreciation, whatever. So, I mean, theoretically, if we, lose $50,000 in trade-in for 1 more year of service, we have a net gain of $50,000.
Assuming that, quick math I like
Yeah.
is, and that's assuming that we don't have a major failure on the
Right.
equipment itself, whether it's the pump or
That's what I
blower,
was
et
gonna ask.
cetera. So,
Who does the maintenance on these?
and these are very high maintenance, or maintenance intensive.
Maintenance intensive debt. We do some of the basic maintenance, but we also take it back to the dealer to do the vast majority, the large maintenance on this equipment.
Well, I'm just picturing this like a semi-truck. I mean, which it kinda is. I mean, with a, the cab and the chassis kinda like a semi, and the rest
Yep.
of it's
Right.
a big piece of equipment. And I would just think, from a,
Yeah.
semi perspective, obviously you appreciate it way more than 5 years.
Right.
I mean, you
Right.
get millions of miles in a semi.
Right.
And from the actual equipment itself that goes on the back of it, it just seems to me that it would have a serviceable life of much greater than 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I would've thought double that, to be honest. So it just surprises me that, after 5 years, that it's already, to a point we need to trade it in and get, trade it in at, 75% of the value gone.
Right.
And also, it just seems.
To your point, we can continue to maintain the existing ones without moving forward. They still have useful life left in them.
And I don't know, I'm just asking a question.
No, they do. 100% they have useful life left in them. We have trended upward on the maintenance cost the last couple of years.
I just think of something that's $1.5 million analysis, that we need to truly, y'all need to really, understand kind of why we,
They're paid for now, the existing,
The
right?
existing ones are paid for.
Right.
This was the first year we leased it for 5 years before.
Right.
How did they do it before that?
we didn't lease it, did we?
Well, it's a lease to own, a purchase,
Capital lease.
capital
Yeah,
lease.
Right.
Yeah.
Previously, before that, we had, now I was not here obviously when we did this last time, we had some very dated equipment that was extremely unreliable. So, they were 10, 12 years old at that point, and, you know, these are trucks, but these are actually pieces of equipment, and they go through a lot. And so this was just trying to maintain high-quality equipment without increasing our cost. This has been a budgeted cost that's actually lower than what we were paying previously.
In my opinion, there's a balance between having really good, high-quality stuff and getting, you know, appropriate, useful life out of things. And I just, in my mind, and I don't do this every day, so I'm not looking at vehicles very often, but I mean, you know, looking at the hospital equipment that we've got that I would think is somewhat comparable, I mean, we're depreciating things for much longer than a 5-year replacement cycle, just because they're meant to last, they're built to last, they're, you know, large
We
capitalized.
have 4 trucks,
4 trucks.
Yeah.
and we got 4 operators, and we all on the full-time these trucks.
Yes, sir. Well, assuming they're not on vacation, yes, sir.
Yeah.
They're busy every day.
They are, and I will say, to your point, Commissioner, if you talk with some of the fleet maintenance people, management people, they actually recommend like a 3-year replacement schedule. Not on these, but on like the light duty vehicles, because the depreciated amount, you can still get a good trade-in value for it. So they actually, like, if you talk with some of the people that do the contracted maintenance, which we don't do, they recommend actually replacing your fleet about every 3 years so that you can essentially streamline your expenses
I
instead
would
of.
argue this is not a good, trade-in value. I mean, to some extent, I mean, and not knowing anything about this specific equipment, but I mean, you know, losing 75% of the equipment over the course of 5 years, I mean, you think about a backhoe, you're not buying a brand new backhoe and 5 years later,
Yeah, this has let me offer a few comments based on my utility experience. I look at, having been in the electric utility industry a while, and then also comparing it to right-of-way equipment. From a utility standpoint, they typically would maintain equipment on about a 12-year cycle, but their duty cycle is a lot different. The duty cycle on this equipment is probably somewhere on the 60 to 70%. On the electric utility equipment, the duty cycle on those is like 25 to 30%. That is the hours of running on a daily basis. This equipment is much, much higher. And I look at my right-of-way experience, I had similar equipment as the VACCON. We had we weren't sucking up liquids, but we were dealing with solids. And we had a similar type equipment. And the duty cycle on that is very high. And the maintenance on those is also very, very high. The trade-in value on here is basically the chassis value, which it costs you, in a new chassis, it costs you about $125 to buy a new chassis like this. And they're usually on about a 12 to 18 month cycle to get one of those once you cut the purchase order. I don't know what you're experiencing now, but that's what it was when I was doing right-of-way equipment. So I'm not terribly concerned about the turnover on a 5-year basis on this kind of equipment, because duty cycle is typically about 2.5 times higher than a typical utility vehicle. And then the other is the type of equipment goes through a lot of use, or I should say wear and tear, because of what we're pulling out of the ground, pulling up sand, basically. Other than the liquid, it's sand, so that's what deteriorates all the parts. So for me, I don't have a great heartburn on this.
I don't have heartburn over
The
it,
sweet
Jeff.
spot ought to be is what our trade-in value is, and the lease period relative to our total capital outlay. And then what the future maintenance cost is if we keep them 1 more year or 2 more years, or, you know, go out to an 8 or 10 year time frame, considering downtime, lack of availability of the equipment. So that's where we would be looking to you, Andrew, is saying, okay, is this a sweet spot for us financially and operationally too?
Well, that's exactly what I'm asking, and is, to your point, I don't have heartburn over it, to use that word. I'm just saying, we being the commission, not necessarily the commissioners, but, you know, we need to make sure that we're, you know, making good decisions of our resources, not just saying we got a budget to replace it, so let's replace it. I mean, if it truly, after 5 years, they're worn out and that is a sweet spot, and we start seeing breakdowns and we start seeing major issues, then okay. But if we haven't run that analysis to see really when we start having major expenses, then maybe this isn't, or maybe it's a 6-year term, maybe it's a 4-year. I mean, it could go the other way too, but, to me, it's just a huge, huge piece of equipment that just seems like it'll be worth more than 5 years of use in my mind. And the other thing I was gonna suggest, kinda along those same lines, is maybe there's some economy scale by buying 4 at the same time, I don't know, maybe you get that big a price break. But, it might make sense to, spread these out so that every, 4 years, we're not getting, or every 5 years, we're not getting hit with all of them at once.
Stagger the buying of them?
Yes, that way you don't get hit with all at once.
Sure, what,
And
if
then
you,
the last thing.
I'm sorry.
No, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, if you staggered them, you would pay for them outright instead of leasing them, because you would just, basically this is like $350,000 a year for a lease versus buying one a year at $500,000.
Fair enough.
One of the things that we talked about earlier in the facilities committee is one of the pump stations where we're gonna be switching different kind of pumps, and we're gonna need the VACCON to pull the stuff, the rags out of the well. And so, I mean, I think it's a really critical piece of equipment. All of these things, I'm sure, are used on a very regular basis for routine things and for situations that require emergency work. And so
Four of them, but all of them aren't in the same shape.
No, I mean, obviously, you got a few of them that are in, the different levels of shape.
So if we did want to stagger them, maybe we could kind of consider that.
That's kind of what I'm asking. And to your point, they're a very critical piece of equipment. But so is Academy Creek. That doesn't mean we build a new Academy Creek every 5 years. It means we respect our equipment, we manage our equipment to the best use of it.
Yeah.
Just because it's a critical piece of equipment doesn't mean we need to throw money at a problem. Not saying we are by any
Yeah.
means, but I am saying that I don't think we should, just do things based off convenience. We should, I mean, if it.
No, I agree with you.
Operational
Yeah.
costs and costs, and that saves us money in the long run. We need to look at the big picture analysis. And not just say the vendor says every 5 years replace it, so every 5 years ask for $1 million.
I think if we see the trend where the maintenance costs are going up, or continue to go up, and they're out of service for a period of times, I think that's something we need to be aware of, because we need this equipment running. And, I don't know how long a downtime is when we're having a problem with it, but I suspect it's not like a day or two.
No, if you take it to Adams, it usually takes you 2 or 3 weeks to get it back. Depends on the issue, obviously.
Right, yeah.
Are those the issues we're having though?
We have had issues, with several, I was trying to pull it up, but I can't get onto the server, I was gonna pull up the maintenance costs that we've had on them. We spend $100,000 a year maintaining these trucks.
On the Bible? Is
On-
that
on
year
the
one or
four-
year five?
I'm saying that's what we've been the last couple of years, so on average. Some of them are higher, obviously. Some trucks you're spending $40,000 a year fixing, some of them you're only spending $5,000 or $10,000 a year fixing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the thing we need to consider. I'm fine with passing along to the commission tomorrow, but I think, we could get some more information. I think it'd be helpful. And just, in general, I just want that to be the general concept of the way we think about doing business.
Right.
Everything we do, I think we should evaluate it and make sure it's the right decision.
Yeah, and if,
Not necessarily this, not necessarily anything, but every
Yeah.
purchase we make, we need to make sure that it makes sense on behalf of our ratepayers and, the citizens of the community. The last
maybe,
thing I was gonna ask, if I may, is, and this is probably way off base and probably can't be done legally, but I'll ask anyhow, because again, just a question, but, so we've got a lot of reserves that are sitting around that aren't making money, that we're not getting any significant return on right now, and we're borrowing money. Is there a way to quote-unquote loan ourselves money and use some of the reserves, like maybe a, deposit reserve to kind of self-finance some of the stuff? Just a question for the future, not necessarily for today, but.
Well, I don't think we could necessarily loan it from the deposits, but I mean, you could, instead of financing it, you could just buy them outright. But the idea was to smooth the cash flow out over the
Sure.
period.
But again, if you bought one every year, then you defer the interest paid cost. Because you're not financing it.
Yes, sir.
And when we're talking the 0.1s and the 0.2s and the 0.3% interest rates that we've been getting in the past, it's kind of a moot point, right? When we're talking 3%, that's
What was the interest
Real
rate
money.
before?
2%,
1.56.
1.56, okay.
1.56%.
the last time we bought
Yes,
that,
sir.
yeah,
So it almost doubled,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
so our payments gonna
I beg your pardon?
double, our payments gonna double.
No,
No,
the
amount of
interest
we're
portion
paying
of it is, but the
Interest is doubling,
overall
but
is
not the
actually,
amount,
yeah, you're financing less money. So yeah, to your point, by financing it, you're adding $125,000 to the purchase.
Yeah, right. Which is, when we're getting zero money on our, not on all our deposits, on some of our deposits, or some of our reserves, we're getting zero money on. If there's a way to self-finance, it might be worth it, it might not. I mean, it's not like we got a lot of investments that are sitting out there making good money that we're trying to hold on. And then the last comment I'll just add is, you know, if this isn't a this month's decision, I'd ask that we just look at this a little closer and then bring it back next month. If it's something that we really gotta pass this month, then I guess that's a different conversation.
I mean, it doesn't have to be passed this month. Obviously, I just, you know, if we pass it next month, that just delays the delivery on the back cons.
And the
Bob.
terms have the potential of changing
Yeah.
if we delay for another
And
month.
of course, interest
Sure,
rate
they could get
risk.
better or worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
You
just
know,
a thing.
Associated with that, but I don't know that's a reason not to do our due diligence. Not that we hadn't. Again, I'm not saying y'all hadn't already. I just don't.
Okay, other comments?
I'd like to move forward on it. I'd like to go ahead and get the replacement equipment and get the newer models in here and so we can reduce our maintenance costs.
Okay, last call for comments or questions. Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor of passing this on to the full commission, show a sign, right hand. Okay, passes. Thank you for the discussion. That's all very valid
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's important. And Andrew, on something similar to this, just a thought is, we may get more questions tomorrow, and you may want to discuss some of the points that have been raised today that you've looked at, and is this financially and operationally a sweet spot to
I
make
will-
the adjustment?
I'll certainly have a whole lot more data for you tomorrow to discuss.
Okay. That's the exact same thing I was thinking to add, and I'll just, you know, build on that and say, you know, because you might have a different recommendation tomorrow. I mean, you might come in
Sure.
tomorrow and say, hey, guys, I really looked at this in 6 years, or you might say, hell, I need 3.
Sure.
You know, who knows?
Okay.
All right, we'll go to item 4, and Andrew, you're going to represent that one to us. Charlie had presented it to the Facilities Committee last meeting, and
Yes.
that passed.
Yeah, he had a conflict, so I told him since he was here for facilities, we would handle it for him here in finance. Pump Station 4044 is on Altamba Connector, currently located, it's in an easement in front of the Brakes for Less. We need to acquire additional property in order to expand that station due to, increased flows. So we've been working with Prime South Bank over on Altamba Connector, and they have agreed in principle to providing us with property. We had it surveyed and an appraisal was completed. The appraised value was $4,725. Prime South has agreed to sell us the property for the $4,725, and the deed does require us to maintain landscaping around the facility so that it, you know, is maintained in good repair in front of their facility. So this will give us more property a little bit further off the road, and we'll be able to demo the above-ground assets at the existing location, maintain that as a manhole to feed the new station, and allow us to meet the flow demands with the new pump station. This has been under design. It's about 90% designed, and if this is moved forward and approved tomorrow, we expect to be out for bid for the construction of the new pump station in the very near future.
Okay, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion that the Brunswick-Glynn Joint Water and Sewer Commission Finance Committee forward the full commission the deed and appraisal with the recommendation for approval and authorization of the chairman to execute any and all documents necessary to complete the purchase.
I'll say,
Any comments or questions, please?
just to clarify, that is 3% of an acre, not 129.
50 by 50.
Oh, wow.
50 by 50, right, yeah.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Passes, thank you. We have a few discussion items.
Just for this first item, Commissioner Cook asked us to add, so I'm going to let him open our discussion here this afternoon.
All right, thank you. You know, last month I brought up this concept of having an employee retention bonus, and I want to try to look at it from the larger picture so that we get a little perspective, so I can pass along what my perspective is to everyone else here. When you do a budget process, it's very formalized. What happens is each one of the department heads submit their information to the finance, or to the budget committee, is finance and the director's office. And it would be for manpower or employee, number of employees, equipment replacement and things like that. And when the budget is finally approved, the determination has been made, in my mind, that this is the number of employees we need to run our business to effectively. And the money to pay for the employees' salaries and benefits is set aside. And that would include, you know, all the other things, match for Social Security and insurance and workman's comp and things like that. And then what happens is, during the course of the year, if you have attrition, you have money left over. And that's not so uncommon, but I don't know, I'm not an economist, but certainly I think the pandemic has had a major impact on the one thing. And we've had a very large number of people that have positions that have not been filled. And the result of that is that many, many people have had to not only do their work in their jobs that they normally do, but they've had to move over and do other people's work. Andrew said something earlier today about some of the water people had to go over and help with the collapsed pipe over at Dunbar. And so what happens is you put a lot of stress on the employees, and I think that they, you know, feel like that they're probably not being recognized or maybe appreciated. And I think we do expect them to work hard, and I think they do that. And even in the earlier meeting, we saw pictures of the people, the team that was doing the replacement on the pipe, and they, you know, you could see they were real proud of their work, and they've done they do work in teams. I saw that very much at the Christmas luncheon. As I was driving out, all the trucks were parked there, and they were talking together. They sat together at the table, so teamwork works really well. And one of the things in an organization is you have to be able to pivot, and we've done a really fine job with that. We see it here at the top, and obviously the employees have done that. So what happens is now we have this pool of money that we had allocated for the employees. And I think one of the proposals that we were considering here is taking 80% of that money, that leftover money, and putting it into the pension. And the pension, of course, is because the stock market is down, there's a deficit in the pension. We're not going to make that up, and you're never going to do that. You know, it's rarely do you ever see a pension that's funded at 100%. It just isn't one of the things, because the assumption is that there's a 7% return, and that's not always realistic. Certainly not very often. I was the chairman of a pension board where I was employed before. So what happens is that if we take 80% of that money and put it into the pension, it's good investment right now. But the other 20% is what I'm concerned about. And what I would like to do is I would like to acknowledge the employees' work, all their efforts, and it goes across the board. It's not here, it's not out in the field only, it's across the board, because we have so many open positions. And I would like to take that money and find a way to give it to people, maybe based on you know, the time they've worked here or something. We think we can figure out a way to at least make sure that we touch everyone who's a full-time employee. And the alternative in my mind is this, is that if you don't take this money, this 20% of the money, and for instance, give it as an employee retention bonus, which, by the way, would not be a part of the pension. It would just be a one-time bonus. But if you don't do that, you put the money to the general fund. Okay, and if it goes back into the general fund, in my mind, okay, what are we going to buy with that? Office supplies, toner. I mean, that's the thing. I don't know what we're going to. The money's just going to go somewhere, and I would like the money to go to the employees to acknowledge the extra efforts they've made because of the staff shortages. And it comes just down to that, to me. And we always say, when we were talking about insurance, we said employees are our most valuable asset here. We have millions of dollars of infrastructure, but our employees are really an important part of our operations and making sure that we're successful in reaching our mission to our customers. So that's kind of my stance. I think I would like this committee to go ahead and make some, be some ideas about it, how you feel about giving a retention bonus to the employees. And I might add that, when COVID came and the federal government was doling out a lot of money, I could tell you that this utility did not get a single dollar from that, directly from the federal government from that. What happened was, we are still grateful that the county agreed to give us some money, up to $4 million. And I know that the county and the city got money, and they both of them gave bonuses to their employees. So it's not as if there's some precedent we're setting. We're acknowledging the work of the people, and our people worked through the pandemic. Some of them got to work from home, and a lot of them had to just come into work every day. And I think we need to acknowledge that, and so that's where I'm standing today, and I'd like input from my fellow commissioners.
Well, we had very brief comments at the last meeting, and to build on that, I would support that where we consider numerous attributes or should I say inputs to the formula, and seniority not being the champion of that formula, but look at job value to the organization, and then perhaps there's some other attribute that needs to be considered. Market conditions for acquisition of that specific talent, whatever that may be, whether it's the operator or the truck driver or customer rep. So those are sort of the attributes I would see going into developing that formula, and looking at the job value. And you probably have bandwidths, I'll call them, of the various salaries, and looking at that, and that way you have some flat amount for those, when you get down to dollar and cents
Now,
for each person. So that's kind of where my view of how that would go. I think it'd be beneficial for us to offer that.
I mean, I agree with that, Commissioner Duncan, in that typically recruitment bonuses, retention bonuses, those type of things are meant to do what they say, retain and recruit. So you don't pay a recruitment bonus for a position that you have zero issue filling. Typically, you don't pay typically retention bonuses when you have zero issue retaining. I mean, typically the bonuses are for, hey, we recognize we're having an issue here. We're trying to solve this issue by fixing it. So I mean, I think it needs to be more of an analysis than just saying 80 and 20, because 80 and 20 is a nice round number, but by definition, it's probably arbitrary if it's just if it's just a random number pick. I mean, there needs to be some science behind it. It needs to be some, hey, we believe we can retain. We're having retention problems here. We can retain better if we did this, and I'd argue that goes along with the actual wage rate analysis that we've been working on for the last several years. I mean, we need a good wage rate analysis that shows what the market for this position is, what the market for this position is, what the market for this position is, and the retention bonus might be a way to help close the gaps if we can't do it all at once through salary adjustments. I just, not saying this is by any means, or not saying the VAC contracts are, but what I'm just diametrically opposed to doing in every walk of life, including personal life, is just taking and making, an arbitrary statement and saying this applies to everything. I mean, I think we need to do an analysis, figure out what makes sense, and have a formal recommendation based off of what this science says. I mean, if we're having 20%, turnover in an area, then by definition, we probably got an issue. We're having 60%, we really got one. But if we've got a position that's fully staffed and has been for the last 20 years, we've never had an issue when somebody does leave. I realize that's, contrary to what I just said, but and the second we have somebody, we got 10 people waiting on it, then that's probably not an area we got an issue. So to Commissioner Duncan's point, let's identify the areas we are having issues, where we are short, where we aren't competitive, and let's make ourselves competitive.
And we ought to do this sooner. I think we ought to get the analysis done quick. Let's make it happen in this fourth quarter of the calendar year.
Right.
Sooner is better than later.
Yeah.
because it'd be more meaningful to do that, so
Yeah.
that's kind of,
And, you know, I think the other thing is, I mean, when I say 20%, you know, I really would like the 80% to go to the pension. And I'm suggesting that the other remaining is something that we have to work with, not that we have to automatically do anything. But, and I also think, even though you have open positions, you have people, like, for instance, the water people were over at Dunbar, working hours and hours all night long on a pipe that collapsed. And so, I mean, these are people also that, well, maybe those jobs are filled, but these people are going and filling in for other people. So we also, I think, need to acknowledge their extra work and the effort.
100% agree. I'm not trying to say we shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
All I'm trying to say is it doesn't need to just be, blindly draw a number out of a hat. It needs to have
Yeah.
some science behind it.
Yeah.
Everything should. Everything we do should, in my opinion. Everything we spend money on should have, some science behind it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I get on just one opinion, but.
Yeah, I think it's just a good investment in retaining employees and making sure that we're acknowledging that, the extra efforts they've made. And I think that's very important in an organization, particularly when you have when you're relying on a lot of teamwork, which is what we're doing here, so.
I still think this ties in to some extent to the wage rate analysis that I've been trying to get done my 4.5 years on the board.
Oh, there's no question, I
We
think.
need
yeah.
a real wage rate analysis that shows what every position in our organization, every job title, for lack of a better term, in our organization is, and whether we're doing it internally, whether we have a consultant do it, is a different conversation, but we need to understand, where we're not competitive so that we can get competitive. And I think we're gonna find we've got some areas that we're having a hard time recruiting for because we're not paying enough. But I don't think we can just say give everybody 40%. We got to understand what that needs to be
Oh,
to
yeah.
get those job classifications competitive.
But
And I think this is a piece of that.
From my standpoint, I feel the need to take this extra money that's, we don't know if we'll ever see it again, but I don't, like I said, I don't want it to end up in office supplies. I want it going to the people that have been doing the extra work and out there and working hard. And so that's why I wanted to be sure that's why I brought it up, because I think it's something that needs to be dealt with, and I think that we as a board have an obligation to be sure that, that our employees are looked after. too.
Andrew, do you think it's practical that by the next meeting, you could bring forward a recommendation with guidance that we've offered here?
I can certainly have some recommendations for you as a discussion item. Obviously, anything we do with this would be after the audit is completed and presented in October. So we'll know exactly what we're working with from a dollar value perspective. So I can have you certainly some discussion items for next month's meeting.
Isn't it true that we've already, I shouldn't ask that question, that was a loaded question.
Okay.
Not fair. It's possible that, we're gonna identify some areas where we got a significant wage gap.
Possible.
That might be part of our recruiting problem, is we've got people we're not paying enough, and, we're undervaluing the people we've got, and the new people aren't applying for the jobs because they think it's undervalued. It might be that we have to use some money to fix those problems. So, I think those two go hand in hand. I think we need to understand, where we're at, because frankly, there are probably some people in this organization, sure, they deserve a bonus, but they'd probably rather have an actual wage increase if they got to choose. They got to choose between a one-time $1,000 bonus or every year for forever a $5,000 increase. So, they probably pick the latter. And I'm not saying they're mutually exclusive, but they do tie into each other. I think we need to understand what our rates are. And I'm just using this,
No
nothing else,
question.
to say it one more time. We need to get a wage rate analysis done that tells us where
Right.
we're not competitive so we can get competitive.
Well, we were on track for that.
Well, okay, on the wage study, we have provided our updated pay information following the cost of living raises in July. And because of the delays with their staffing issues and having to reassign people to get this done, they are now having to collect updated wage information from all of the, competitors or whatever you want to call it, comparative utilities, and update that before we can move forward. We talked to them last week, I believe it was, and so hopefully we'll have some update on that by the next meeting as well, because they've got to go back and get all that comparable data once again to make sure that it's up to date.
And I hope, and I hope this is just, just the way you said it, I hope they are not comparing us against comparable utilities. I hope they are comparing us against the market in general, because frankly, we're not just competing with Jessup Joint Water Sewer Commission, we're competing with the Buckies. We're
We are.
competing with, that's fixing to come, I mean,
That's right.
we're competing with the general market in this area,
Yeah.
in addition to those other areas. I mean, we
Yeah.
need to truly understand what it's gonna take. And the people that do that every day, they're really good at it. It's not that big a deal to do. They know how to look at a job description and,
Yeah.
value a, and of course, it's our job to make sure they've got accurate job descriptions and they have, what they're basing their analysis off of is accurate. But I mean, they do that every day. That's all they do. They're really good at it.
Well,
It just makes sense to do.
Andrew, let me ask you a question. When we hire someone, say out in the field there, what's the training cycle? How long does it take before where you would feel like they're up to speed?
I mean, obviously, it depends on the position. For some of the entry-level positions, you're looking at 3 to 6 months before they're,
Right.
having somebody, for lack of a better term, hold their hands. Most of that safety-related training. For an operator position, it's 18 to 24 months, just because they can't get a license until that point. So they got to go through training and get the license, and so they can do work, but they can't be on duty by themselves because they don't have the licensure requirements. So it's anywhere from, depending on the position, 3 to 18 months.
And, in my mind, that translates into, we do well to retain people.
Oh,
To
absolutely.
keep them on board so we don't have to retrain people. And, you don't like to lose institutional knowledge. When you see these people that know where every valve is, and, those are really key people. Because, the drawings get old. Even, I guess the ones at the GPS don't.
The
but
ones that GPS theoretically do not.
They're not, but the other ones we have might get a little bit old, so,
No, I will
yeah, that'd
bring
be great.
forth recommendations at the next Finance Committee meeting, at least for
Okay.
discussion.
And I appreciate my fellow commissioners' consideration of this, because I think it's a very important thing, and I'm feeling very positive that we can find a solution, so.
Okay, good discussion, thank you. Let's move on to discussion item number 2. That's our financial statement for the month.
Good afternoon.
Welcome back.
It's good to be back. The item before us is our financial statements for July 2022. Some items of note before we get started. We are in the midst of our audit. I spoke with our contact with Malden and Jenkins this morning, and they are going to try to do the field work remotely. They would like to have a preliminary trial balance by September the 1st, and work with us. We'll have the audit complete by our deadline in October. None of the adjusting entries have been done yet, so bear that in mind as we go through. We're still working, but those accrual entries are still needed. The comparison column on your balance sheet still says June 30th, 2021. It will continue to say that until the audit is complete, and then we'll roll those numbers over. The first item is our accounts receivable balance. It is 1.966. 1.8 of that is customer receivables. 210,000 is our tower receivables. Our allowance for bad debt is at 57,000. The intergovernmental receivable line, that 1.14 was our GFA receivable from last year. We will have another one of those entries this year. It will be upwards, it will be higher than 3 million. We did have a lot of our Delta municipal work was done prior to June. The request was made in July. We received their funds on August the 4th, so just,
Also, that's why the cash balance and the cash and cash equivalents is low, because
now
we
you're
were
taking all my notes.
waiting on $3 million. They, you send them for 200,000. They send that back pretty quick. I don't know if it took longer or not, but it felt like it took an awful long time to get the 3 million back.
Yes. Interest receivable, we will have another interest receivable adjusting entry when we get into our investments, and that will book out for 6 months, and we'll do half of that, reverse half of that every 3 months. Unbilled revenue, we're still waiting to do that entry. Down to our SPLOST account, that 445,000, we have used all of that 15 million, except for just a small amount.
And the bulk of that's being held in retainage on the force main project.
Yeah. Fixed assets, along with those year-end entries, I have not been able to do all of the capital assets and capitalization of projects. So as I do that this month, that will change those year-end numbers for that. Page 2. The only mention here is the net pension. That is at 2.5, and that is down from the 2.8 due to our $300,000 payment last fall. We thank you for that. Page 3, summary revenue. Operating revenues, we are over projected budget by $491,000. If you'll notice in our expense portion for personnel expenses, it says we're over budget by $234,000. Again, that is due to the accruals not being made on payroll. We have one whole payroll that was actually for June work paid out on July 1st. So that will all be reverted back into June, plus a portion of our July 15th payroll. So that will bring that back down to a reasonable number. Capital cost, if you'll note on our budget for our capital cost, it's $1,075,900. If you'll notice on our budget for the first month, we front-loaded all of that into July, so that we'll have those funds available for capital purchases to go ahead and get those ordered and POs issued. Our operating expenses there are under budget by $347,000. Our capital improvement fees, $317,000 for the month of July. Page 4, expenses. Operating expenses, again, under budget by $347,000. That, along with their over budget on the revenues, brings us to a total net revenue of $838,978.
I will say, just briefly, looking at these POs, just to give you an idea, some of like the chemical POs for water production, we put in annual POs for that amount. So they look like they're over budget for about 10 months until those PO amounts come down as we bill against them.
But they just take the money out of them as the product.
Draw
They bill
against
against the encumbrance, and it goes into
Right.
expenses and out of the
Yeah.
encumbrance.
Yes. At the bottom of the sheet for net revenues, if you'll notice the last two columns, those columns usually have the same number. The variance there is the difference of that 11 months for the capital cost.
Right.
So those other 11 months, if we were actually allocating 1/12 a month, that would be $986,242. So that's what that difference is there. Any questions? On to our supplemental schedule of cash balances, page 5. As Mr. Burrows noted earlier,
You're welcome.
yes, that is down. And we did receive that draw on August the 4th. So you will see that balance back up in August. For the investment accounts, again, those year-end adjusting entries, we have not yet done the fair market value adjustment. So on page 5 and 6, the investment accounts, those numbers will change to reflect their fair market value. At the bottom of page 6, our total in cash and cash equivalents is $71,590,000.
So on that, so we got $10 million in overnight cash. Is that, am I reading that
That's
correctly?
correct.
That's investment accounts, 10 million?
No, 10 million in overnight cash, 45 in investments. So yes, 10 million in overnight cash.
Just, I mean, it seems, I mean, I get we got a lot of expenses, but, you know, is there not a better way
Oh,
to
yeah,
invest that?
sorry.
I mean, at one point, it was almost a moot point because everything was so low, but right now, I mean, a 30-day treasury bill's a couple %. Does not make sense to, you know, stage this in and, you know, on a and I don't know what the fees are. It might be that you say, no, the fees are more expensive or the labor to do it. I've never done any of that. I have no idea. I'm just, you know, speculating what makes sense to me might not actually work. But I mean, if you got $10 million and, you know, divide that up over the course of, you know, 30 days and just take, you know, X amount of that, maybe not 30 days, maybe a month, and just say, I mean, over 4 weeks, and just say every week we're gonna invest $2.5 million in a 30-day treasury bond. That way, every week, we got 2.5 million liquidating.
The intent was to move some of those funds into investment before June, the end of June, but I was out of the office and that kind of fell through the cracks.
I'll
That was my
tell you
fault.
what, we'll be happy to get our new finance director to do that analysis for us.
Ah, there you go.
Here's my,
We do have a meeting with our Synovus investment reps next week, so yes, sir, we acknowledge the comment.
it just seems like something we've been talking about for a couple of
Absolutely,
years now.
yes, sir.
I mean, at some point, either tell me I'm crazy or.
No, sir.
Well, I mean, obviously, the less money, I mean, we have seen an increase in the banking fees by taking money out of the Truist accounts, but we have been gaining more than that. Not significantly more than the banking fees, but
Well, so again, let's analyze it and
Yeah.
say, you know what, we have to keep a minimum of $5 million, that's our break-even point.
Right.
Maybe $5 million is our break-even point at 1%. Maybe at 2%, interest rate is $4 million.
Right.
I mean, I just think we owe it to ourselves
Absolutely.
to be efficient with our money
And we're looking for those tools that we can make those changes and pivot a little more, with a little more flexibility than we've given ourselves right now. So that's why we'll bring information back to the next meeting for you, and your comment will be addressed, sir.
And then the same thing with the 15 million held by trustees. Is there a way to?
that's invested.
That is invested, okay, so.
We have no control over what it's invested in,
But it is
but that is invested.
Fair enough.
Yeah, basically in the overnight cash, we got about 6.3 million available that we
Right.
could do something with limited restrictions, so
Well, the cash and cash
a
equivalent was 1.5.
recommendation next month or findings would be beneficial.
And it's more than 6.3 though, there's 1.5 in cash and cash equivalents. And then the legally restricted reserves, I still think we can invest them to some extent.
Understood.
I mean, legally restricted, but you can still, have some safe investments.
Yes,
Anyhow,
yes, sir. We'll take care of it.
On to page 7, our project report. This is a kind of a smaller version there due to the fact that we have not finished our year end. I didn't even bother to put the middle section there showing available balances until we do our market adjustments on our reserve accounts. So the cost up to June 30th, 2022 was $39,882,729. Expenditures for the month of July, almost $375,000. Again, I need to get with Mr. Burrows, and some of these projects have finished, and they won't be moved off of the project report and capitalized.
I ran the report yesterday, and could we still get bills that are for June 30th for another 6 weeks or so after June 30th? So our project expenses so far for 2020, FY '22 was 24.5 million just that fiscal year in getting those projects done. It's actually 25 million, but we did a $500,000 project that the county reimbursed us for, so. 25 would have been a nice round number.
Yes. Any questions or comments on July's financials? Okay, just one note, I did rerun the financials for June 30th this morning. Tentatively, without any adjusting entries, we're looking at a net operating revenue of 2.4. That is 1.2 on revenues and a under budget of 1.2 on expenses.
Now, with that being said, there's still some adjusting, so that will come down.
There's a lot of adjusting
That will
entries
come
left.
down.
That will come down. That just gives us
Unaudited
a,
figures.
Unaudited figures. Yes.
Unaudited figures.
yes.
One item of note,
Yes.
just looking at the raw revenues from sewer and water, we're over our budget, which is always a good thing. We're selling more than we had planned. Have y'all been able to develop a trend to understand are we trending up for any specific reason? Meaning, the density is higher on average monthly because the tourism is up, or our growth rate
We
is-
have monthly trends for at least going back 5 years. We can get that data. Obviously, July and August are always our 2 highest months of usage. The suspicion is heavily that that's tourism driven.
tourism and irrigation.
And, those are our highest months. The lowest months of the year are usually December and January, because we have less people in town those months. So, you know, this is a little ahead. I mean, we don't actually break down on the year-to-date budget by those percentages. We just do 1/12 on the report. But this is a little ahead percentage-wise on the budget from where historically the revenues have come in July.
Yeah.
Not substantially, but a little bit ahead.
And what I would suggest as we go forward is that we look at, when we develop our budget, we aren't just arbitrarily picking 1/12 based on the timing of the months, is that we look at what our historical information is, and we budget the revenue, the sales, based on those months. So if August is traditionally a high month, high revenue month, then our budget ought to be a high revenue month. And then our variances are lower and closer to what the business is trending.
Sure.
So,
100% agree. Especially if it's substantial.
that's right.
I mean, if it's a 0.5%.
Because
Yeah.
I think of our newest commissioner is going to join us in January. Back feels me that when he looks at it, he may have a similar view in that. So that we aren't always looking at our biggest explanation is timing in
Very
terms of either sales or expenditures. Okay?
Okay, all right.
Other than that, I'm very pleased that directionally is where we are. Very strong. David, congratulations for joining the team. We look forward to more engagement with you.
Well,
Anything else for the Finance Committee?
That's it?
No, sir.
Then we are adjourned. Thank you
All
all.
right, thank you.